The soldier had to abandon his canine German Shepherd in the forest. What the dog did next will break youth. They had survived every mission together, side by side through gunfire, freezing nights, and moments that would break the average man. But, on one final operation, deep in a dense, hostile forest, the unthinkable happened, a decision no soldier should ever have to make. He had to leave his loyal canine partner behind, alone, wounded, with no way out. What that German Shepherd did next defied every rule of nature, every limitation of pain, and every expectation of what a dog is capable of. And when they finally crossed paths again, the moment left everyone in tears. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. This helps us bring more inspiring stories like this one to you. The helicopter blades cut through the heavy morning fog like a whisper that didn't belong. Inside, Sergeant Mason Briggs sat quietly, his eyes fixed on the ground below as the forest stretched endlessly in every direction. He wasn't alone. Beside him, lying flat but alert, was Rex, his canine partner. A 5-year-old German Shepherd, with a sable coat and golden eyes that had seen more than most humans ever would, trained for search and rescue, explosive detection, and combat tracking. Rex wasn't just a military asset, he was family. 15 minutes out, the pilot called. Mason didn't respond. He reached down and scratched behind Rex's ears. A silent ritual before every mission. "You ready, buddy?" he whispered. Buddy gave a soft bark, his tail thudding once against the metal floor. Mason smiled faintly. This would be their final deployment together. Mason had already received his discharge papers. One more mission, and they would go home. Back to Idaho. Back to quiet walks, warm mornings, and peace. At least, that's what he hoped. They were dropped at the edge of Zone 9, a forest region that had become a ghost field since rumors of landmines and enemy traps turned it into a dead zone. But intelligence had located a missing recon team's beacon deep in the forest, and Mason and Rex were sent in to confirm their status. 2 men, 1 dog, 48 hours. Simple. The first 24 hours were uneventful. Rex moved with silent confidence, sniffing out faint traces of movement, always a few paces ahead but never out of reach. Mason trusted him more than he trusted any weapon. Rex had once found a wounded soldier buried under rubble by smell alone, a feat that earned him the nickname Ghost Nose. By nightfall, they reached a clearing and made camp under a collapsed pine. The air was heavy, quiet, the kind of silence that makes your skin prickle. Rex lay beside Mason, head resting on his boots. His breathing was steady. Mason stared up at the treetops, thinking about home. 2 more days, he whispered. Then we're out. He didn't know those words would haunt him. The next morning, everything unraveled. They were halfway up a steep ridge when Rex suddenly stopped. Ears high, body frozen. Mason's instincts kicked in. "What is it, boy?" Rex didn't move, he growled, low and deep, then took a single step back, and that's when the ground exploded. It wasn't loud, not at first. The pressure trap was shallow, meant to disorient, not kill. But it was enough. Mason was thrown back several feet, his arm slamming into a rock. His ears rang. Dust clouded everything. He sat up, blinking through the haze. Rex. Silence, then a whimper. His eyes snapped toward the sound. There, caught under a fallen tree, was Rex, his back leg twisted at a sickening angle. Blood on his paw. He tried to rise once, twice, then collapsed again with a sharp yelp. Mason scrambled to him. "No, no, no, hold on, buddy." He tried to lift the tree, but it was too heavy. He dug around it, pushed, kicked, nothing. Worked. Rex licked his hand, eyes cloudy with pain but still locked onto his handler. Mason activated his radio. "Base, this is Delta 1. K9 is injured. I repeat, K9 is down and pinned. Request immediate extraction. Static. He tried again. Nothing. The comms were dead. He had to make a decision. Fast. Enemy patrols were known to sweep the area at night. If he stayed, they'd both be sitting targets. If he left to get help, Rex might not survive. His heart pounded. He looked into Rex's eyes. "I'll come back for you," he said, voice cracking. "I swear, I need to go now." Rex whined but didn't move, almost as if he understood. Mason took his dog tags off and wrapped them around Rex's neck. "Hold these for me." Then he stood up, and walked away. Every step tore at him. He didn't look back. He COULDN single quotes. 3 hours later, he reached the evac point, barely coherent, blood on his face, mud on his knees. But the words came out clear. "My partner's still out there." They tried to tell him it was too dangerous. The terrain was compromised. No choppers could land in that zone again. They needed authorization. Bison didn't care. "I don't leave him," he said. And he meant it. The forest was different without Mason's scent. Rex lay motionless beneath the fallen pine, his breathing shallow, one leg twisted unnaturally beneath him. Blood had crusted around the wound, and every movement sent lightning up his spine. But still, he didn't cry out. He waited. Because that's what a canine soldier was trained to do. To hold the line, to trust the handler. His handler had left, but not for good. Rex knew that. Mason had said, "I'll come back," and Rex remembered every word. Hours passed, the sun dipped lower, slicing golden rays through the trees. The forest was deceptively peaceful. Birds chirped, insects hummed, and yet, every sound felt like a warning. A twig snapped. Rex's ears twitched. Movement. Close. Unfamiliar. He let out a warning growl, deep and guttural, not to intimidate, but to signal. Even injured, even pinned, he was still alert. But it wasn't Mason. Far from base, the forest had become a no man's land, patrolled by desperate scavengers and renegade militants. One of them crept closer now. Thin, sunburned skin, a rusted rifle slung across his shoulder, eyes scanning the underbrush. Not for humans, for animals, for resources, for anything that could be sold or consumed. Rex saw him, and despite the pain his training kicked in, he barked, loud, aggressive. The man stopped. Then Rex bared his teeth, forcing himself into a half-rise using only his front legs. Blood dripped into the grass, but the show of force was enough. The stranger backed away slowly. A moment later, Rex collapsed back into the dirt, body shaking. He had won this round, but he wouldn't win the next. Miles away, at a temporary base set up on the forest's edge, Sergeant Mason Briggs was tearing the tent apart. "You don't understand," he growled at the operations officer. "He's not a pet. He's not a number. That dog has saved more lives than half this base combined." "We appreciate your service, Briggs," the officer replied, "but we can't authorize another team into Zone 9 without higher clearance." Mason slammed his fist on the table. "Then I'll go alone." "You'll die." Mason leaned in, voice tight. "Then I'll die trying." There was silence in the tent. Then a low voice spoke from behind. Not alone. It was Corporal Denise Hall, logistics specialist, former medic, and the only other person on base who had ever worked with Rex in the field. She stepped forward, setting her hand on Mason's shoulder. "I remember what that dog did for me in Kandahar," she said. "I owe him." Mason met her eyes. He didn't need to ask twice. Within an hour, they had packed food, a sat phone, basic trauma supplies, and a thermal drone for nighttime visuals. No authorization, no backup, just two soldiers and the promise to bring a brother home. Back in the forest, night had arrived like a curtain of ink. The temperature dropped fast. Cold sank into Rex's bones, and his body began to tremble uncontrollably. He was fading. His vision blurred. Somewhere in his memory, he saw Mason again. That first moment in training, the bond forged through sweat and sand. The man had never raised his voice at him, had never let go of the leash, even when things got hard. And now, Rex was alone. His paw scraped at the earth, just barely reaching the tags, still looped around his neck. He licked them, just once, and then closed his eyes. Mason and Denise moved fast, guided only by GPS coordinates and fragments of memory. Every step was heavier than the last. Mason barely spoke. His eyes scanned the forest like a predator, adrenaline keeping him sharp. Denise checked the drone feed. "I've got a heat source weak. Could be him." Mason's heart pounded. "Lead the way." The trail twisted into rough terrain, the ground slick with moss and branches that grabbed at their boots. After 30 more minutes, Denise stopped. There, beneath a tree, barely visible, was a slumped figure, motionless. Mason dropped to his knees before the drone had even landed. Rex crawled forward, heart in his throat. Then he saw it, the tags, still hanging around the dog's neck. Rex's eyes opened, just a sliver, and he whined. Mason choked on a breath. "I got you, boy. I got you." He checked the legs still pinned. With Denise's help, they used a makeshift jack to lift the branch just enough to free it. Rex yelped once, then went silent again. "Stay with me," Mason whispered. "Don't quit now." Denise prepped a saline 4 while Mason wrapped the leg tightly. They administered a low-dose sedative to help with the pain. "He's a fighter," she said. Mason nodded, voice shaking. "He waited. He believed you'd come back." And he had. As dawn broke, they reached the evac point. Rex was carried on a stretcher, 4 in place, wrapped in Mason's field jacket. His breathing was labored but steady. The med team met them with a chopper. Mason rode in the back, holding Rex's paw the entire way. The military clinic wasn't a hospital. It was a converted base hangar half lit by flickering overhead bulbs and filled with the scent of antiseptic and dust. But to Mason Briggs, it was the only place that mattered now because Rex was inside. The German Shepherd lay on a padded table in a corner curtained off from the rest of the patients. His hind leg was wrapped in thick gauze, immobilized in a sling. An IV dripped fluid steadily into his foreleg. Machines beeped softly beside him, reading vitals. He hadn't moved in hours. Mason sat beside the table, elbows on his knees, fingers laced tightly. He hadn't changed out of his dirty uniform, hadn't eaten, barely blinked. A nurse approached. "Sir, we've cleaned him up and stabilized the leg. The break's clean, but he's going to need surgery and long-term therapy." "That means I'm staying," Mason interrupted, not even looking up. "Don't try to send me anywhere." The nurse hesitated, then nodded and left him alone. Mason exhaled, staring at the dog who had once dragged him out of a minefield, and alerted him to a tripwire with only a look. Now Rex couldn't even lift his head. He reached out and gently touched the dog's paw. "You waited for me," he whispered. "Now I'm gonna wait for you." 2 days passed, then 3, then 5. Rex barely moved. When he did open his eyes, they were fogged with painkillers. He refused food. He didn't respond to touch. Not even Mason's voice seemed to break through. Mason began to worry it wasn't just the leg that had been broken. Can dogs get depression? He asked Denise one night as they sat on a bench outside the hangar. She glanced at him. PTSD? Absolutely. Especially war dogs. He doesn't even look at me. Denise was quiet a moment. Then, he's grieving. Mason's throat tightened. For what? For the moment he thought you left for good? That silence hit harder than any explosion Mason had faced in the field. On the 7th night, Mason couldn't sleep. He slipped back into the clinic after hours, stepping softly through the dim corridors. When he reached Rex's stall, the dog was lying in the exact same position, but his eyes were open. Mason crouched down. Hey buddy. Rex blinked slowly. I brought you something. From his pocket, Mason pulled out Rex's favorite old toy, a knotted rope, worn and frayed. The only thing Rex had insisted on carrying from base to base, even when regulation said not to. He placed it beside the dog's head. Rex didn't move. Mason swallowed hard and sat down on the floor. He leaned his back against the wall and spoke. Not loudly, just enough for Rex to hear. I still remember that first day they paired us. You didn't trust anyone, wouldn't let me touch you. Took me 3 weeks before you'd even sit next to me. And then one day, I got injured during a drill. You ran over to me, sat beside me like a statue. Didn't leave my side. Remember that? His voice cracked. I'm not leaving your side now either. I don't care how long it takes. The room fell quiet again, but this time Rex's ear twitched at. Was small, but it was something. Over the next week, Rex began to come back. Little things. He turned his head when Mason entered the room. He accepted small bites of food from his hand. When the surgeon came in to assess him before surgery, Rex actually lifted his head to watch. It wasn't fast. It wasn't easy, but it was real, and Mason clung to every sign like a lifeline. The operation was a success. The fracture was reset, the muscles stitched, the leg wrapped tight again in a protective brace. Rex would walk again, but it would take time. Months of therapy. Mason didn't hesitate. He filed for leave and volunteered to manage Rex's rehab personally. I'll train him back to life the same way I trained him for war, he told the board. They approved the request, with a quiet warning, some dogs never come back the same. Mason only nodded. Neither do soldiers. Therapy began at sunrise. Small steps first. Mason lured Rex forward with bits of boiled chicken, 1 foot at a time, supporting his hind legs with a sling. Rex growled, resisted, collapsed more than once. But each time, Mason lifted him back up. You don't quit, he'd whisper. Not now. There were days Rex wouldn't move. When pain overwhelmed him, or fear returned to his eyes, Mason learned to recognize it not weakness, but memory. The forest was still in him. The noise, the silence. The moment Mason had left him. So Mason kept talking, telling stories, reading old field reports aloud, letting Rex hear his voice like a steady rope pulling him back to the world. 3 weeks in, Rex took 2 steps on his own. By week 5, he stood without the sling. By week 7, he barked again. Loud, strong, defiant. Mason fell to his knees, beside him, pulling him close. That's my boy, he whispered, and for the first time in months, Rex wagged his tail, not just once, but steady. They weren't ready for deployment. Not anymore. The war chapter was closed, but they were ready for something else, a new beginning. Together, he didn't speak, didn't cry, but he never let go. The leaves had begun to fall in Idaho. Mason stood barefoot in the grass of his small backyard, holding a cup of black coffee as Rex sniffed slowly along the fence line. The brace was still on his hind leg, but he walked with more confidence. Now no longer dragging it, but still favoring it slightly, especially on colder mornings. It had been 3 months since the forest. 3 months since a helicopter lifted Rex's broken body from the wilderness. 3 months since Mason had thought he might lose the only partner who had never let him down. The Army had granted Mason medical leave, and eventually, honorable discharge. They called it psychological fatigue. He called it honesty. He'd had enough of war. And more than that, he couldn't leave Rex again. Not now. Not ever. The VA counselor had suggested he adopt him formally. It'll give you both peace, she said. The paperwork was nearly complete, until the letter arrived. It was handed, sealed with the Department of Defense insignia, thick paper, clean ink, the kind of letter that carried decisions made far above anyone's pay grade. Mason opened it alone, at the kitchen table. As he read, the blood drained from his face. Pending evaluation, and upon approval from K9 Command. K9 Unit REX 117 is scheduled for reassignment to active federal duty. Handler reassignment to be determined. Reassignment. They were taking him back. Denise answered on the first ring. Tell me you're joking, she said after hearing the news. I wish I was. He's not even fully recovered. How the hell can they consider redeployment? Because he's good, Mason replied flatly. Because even half-healed, he's better than most dogs in the system. They know he won't go without you. That's why they're giving me an option, Mason said, voice tightening. They're offering me reinstatement as his handler. A short contract, domestic missions only. Denise was quiet. Mason, you got out. I know. And he was almost lost. I know. So what are you going to do? Mason didn't answer, because he didn't know. That night, he sat beside Rex on the porch. The sky above them was soft with stars, the kind you only see far from cities. Crickets chirped in rhythm. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. Mason ran his fingers behind Rex's ears. They want us back, buddy. Rex lifted his head slightly. His eyes met Mason's, calm but alert. You still got it in you? The dog's tail moved faintly. Mason chuckled, dry and tired. Yeah, that's what I was afraid of. The silence between them stretched, thick with memory. Mason thought about the forest, about the night he walked away, about the day he came back, and about the promise he made. You waited for me. Now, I'll wait for you. He couldn't break that now, not for anyone. The next morning, Mason drove to the regional military canine facility. It sat like a fortress on the edge of town, tall fences, long driveways, crisp flags fluttering in the wind. He walked in unannounced. Sergeant Briggs, the base officer, greeted him with surprise. We didn't expect you so soon. I'm not staying long, Mason said. I came to say something, and I want it on record. He placed a folded envelope on the desk. Inside, Rex's full adoption request, signed and notarized. He's not going back. The officer frowned. Sergeant, you understand that under federal regulation? I don't care about regulations, Mason snapped. He was injured in the line of duty. He nearly died, and I've been the only handler by his side since, which is exactly why he's being recommended for domestic security duty. He's bonded with you. Mason leaned forward, voice low. Then, he goes nowhere without me, period. The officer narrowed his eyes. Are you threatening to block a military redeployment? No, Mason replied, standing tall. I'm promising to protect my partner. The man studied him a moment, then said quietly, You know this will cost you. I've already paid enough, Mason said. So has he. 2 weeks passed. Without a response, Mason trained Rex every morning like nothing had changed. Light exercises, obedience drills, slow runs along the riverbank. Rex was stronger now, sharper. He barked at the mail truck like he used to, and once again carried his rope toy in his mouth like a badge of honor. But Mason's chest tightened every time the phone rang. Then, one morning, a different letter came. This one bore no seal. Just a short paragraph. Your application for permanent adoption of K9, Rex 117, has been reviewed and approved. Effective immediately. Rex is no longer subject to reassignment. His file is closed. Mason read it 3 times. Before he allowed himself to breathe, he knelt beside Rex and whispered, You're home now, for good. Rex licked his hand once, leaned into his chest, and let out a deep, satisfied sigh. That night, they sat on the porch, again this time not with uncertainty, but peace. The world still spun. The war still raged. But somewhere, in a quiet pocket of Idaho, a soldier and his dog had made it out. Together, they had both bled, they had both waited, and now, they had both healed. Downtown Boise buzzed with early autumn energy. Families filled the sidewalks, children pointed at shop windows decorated with pumpkins, and golden leaves spun lazily down from the trees. Mason hadn't been to the city in years, and certainly not with Rex. But today wasn't about him. It was about showing the world that Rex wasn't just a retired war dog. He was more than a soldier. He was family. They'd been invited to speak at a local high school's Veterans Appreciation Assembly. Mason hesitated at first. He wasn't one for attention, and Rex didn't exactly love crowds, but something inside him said yes. Maybe because young people needed to know what loyalty looked like. Maybe because Rex deserved to be seen. When they arrived, Mason parked at the far end of the lot. Rex stood steady beside him, no longer limping, although Mason could still sense the caution in his gait. The old injury had healed well, but some shadows never left completely. Rex wore a vest. Now, not a combat vest, but a soft one that read K9 Veteran. Please ask to pet. Mason adjusted it gently. Let's do this, partner. The gymnasium was packed. Rows of students sat cross-legged on the bleachers, murmuring excitedly as teachers tried to restore order. When Mason and Rex entered through the side door, a few students turned, then a few more. Then the whole room quieted. He hadn't expected applause, but it came anyway. Mason walked to the center of the gym floor. Rex at his side, ears high, tail low but wagging slightly. The principal handed him a microphone and smiled. He's beautiful, she whispered. Mason smiled back. He's a warrior. He faced the students, cleared his throat, and began. This is Rex, he said simply. He's not a pet, he's a soldier, and he's the reason I'm alive today. He told them the short version, without blood, without fear, just the truth. The bond, the forest, the weight, the promise. When he finished, the room was silent. Then a single clap, then another, then a standing ovation. But the real test hadn't happened yet. It came as they were leaving, walking across the sidewalk toward the truck. A scream shattered. The moment across the street, a little girl, no older than 6, had broken free from her mother and run into the road, chasing a toy that had rolled into traffic. A delivery truck turned a corner too fast. To close, Mason shouted. The girl froze. And before anyone could move, Rex launched. the leash ripped from Mason's hand. In seconds, the German Shepherd crossed the street and tackled the child, knocking her out of the truck's path just as the vehicle screeched and veered, missing them by inches. The entire block went silent. The driver leaped out, white as a ghost. The mother screamed again, this time from relief. The child sat on the ground unharmed, cradled beneath the large dog's chest. Rex stood over her like a shield, not barking, just watching. When Mason reached them, Rex looked up and let out a low whine, like he was asking, "Did I do good?" Mason knelt beside him, heart pounding. "You did perfect," he whispered. He wrapped his arms around Rex and the little girl at the same time. The mother dropped beside them, crying. "He saved her, he saved my baby." Paramedics arrived, police reporters. Mason gave a brief statement, but the cameras were more interested in Rex, who now sat calmly, tail swishing, eyes alert but relaxed as if saving lives was simply what he did. The photo hit the local news within hours. Retired K9 hero saves girl in Miracle Street rescue. The story went national the next morning. Thousands of comments, emails, interviews, everyone wanted to know about the dog who had come back from the edge of death to save a stranger's child. Mason didn't care about fame, but he was proud, not because Rex had done something heroic, but because Rex had shown the world what Mason already knew. That courage doesn't end when the uniform comes off. That loyalty doesn't fade with scars. That healing doesn't mean becoming someone new. It means becoming yourself again. Later that week, Mason and Rex sat together in the quiet of their porch. The evening was warm, the sky painted in purples and golds. Rex's head rested on Mason's lap. "You know," Mason said, scratching gently behind his ear, "you were supposed to be retired." Rex let out a long breath. Mason smiled, "But I guess some dogs are born to protect no matter what." He looked down at the dog who had once waited for him in the forest, alone and bleeding, and now stood between strangers and tragedy without hesitation. "You came back," he whispered, "not just to me, to yourself." Rex closed his eyes. At peace. And for the first time in years, so was Mason. The town had changed since the rescue, or maybe it was Mason who had changed. Everywhere he went, someone stopped him. At the coffee shop, at the gas station, at the park. Not to ask about the war, or the missions, or what it was like to be a soldier. They asked about Rex. "How's the hero dog? Can we see him? Do you think he'd be okay coming to meet my son?" It was strange at first. Mason had spent most of his adult life unseen, anonymous in Camo, known only by his rank. But now, people smiled at him, not because of his uniform, but because of the dog at his side. Rex wore no medals, no ribbons, just his simple K9 veteran vest. But to the people of Boise, he was more than a dog. He was living proof that courage doesn't retire. One afternoon, Mason stood in front of the community center, staring at a flyer someone had slipped into his mailbox, seeking certified therapy. Dog volunteers for school and hospital programs. He stared at the paper for a long time, not because he was unsure of Rex, but because he wasn't sure if he was ready. Still, he went home, set the flyer on the table, and watched Rex lie down beside the couch, head resting on his paws, eyes calm. "Guess we're not done serving," Mason said quietly. They started small. A local elementary school welcomed Rex into their reading program for children with speech anxiety. He would lie beside them as they read aloud, his quiet presence easing their tension. Mason sat nearby, answering questions gently. "Did he really save someone? Is he scary when he's mad? Can I pet him? Yes, no. Always ask first." One boy, Liam, was nearly nonverbal on the first day. He sat cross-legged on the floor with a book in his lap, barely whispering. But Rex leaned in slowly, resting his head against the boy's knee, and Liam began to read word by word, page by page. By the third week, he smiled every time he walked through the classroom door. Hospitals came next. Pediatric wings, veterans, clinics, chemotherapy rooms. Rex moved between beds with quiet grace, as if he knew which patients needed him most. He would sit still for minutes at a time, just breathing with someone, offering his warmth without a sound. Mason watched from the doorway. It wasn't always easy. The beeping machines brought back memories. The smell of alcohol wipes, the look in the eyes of people who'd seen too much pain. But Rex was calm, unshaken. And when Mason saw a veteran with shaking hands reach out to stroke the shepherd's fur, tears in his eyes, something inside Mason softened. They weren't soldiers anymore, but they were still on duty. One evening, after a long day of visits, Mason and Rex returned home. The porch light glowed softly. The air was cool. Rex climbed onto his favorite spot, an old rug by the door, and settled in with a tired sigh. Mason sat on the step, arms draped over his knees. He looked out at the dark street, empty and peaceful, then turned to the dog beside him. "You found your purpose again," he said. Rex opened one eye, tail thumping once. The invitation came from Washington. A ceremony. Quiet, not televised. Just a gathering of veterans, handlers, and a few dignitaries. The Department of Defense was launching a new program honoring retired military. K9 South with formal commendations and lifetime care benefits. Rex's name was on the list. Mason didn't want the spotlight. But this wasn't about him, so he suited up, not in uniform, just a clean jacket, boots polished, and Rex's vest gently brushed one last time. At the ceremony, they stood side by side as the general read the citation aloud. For unwavering loyalty, unmatched courage, and a bond that no battlefield could break, we honor K9 Rex 117. As applause filled the hall, Mason knelt down, whispering into Rex's ear, "You earned this, boy. Every second of it." Rex didn't bark, didn't move. He just leaned in strong, steady, proud. The room faded around them. For a moment, it was just the two of them again, a soldier and his shadow. They were never just handler and dog. They were brothers in silence, partners in pain, and survivors of something few people ever truly understand. Rex didn't just come back. From the forest he came back to life, and in doing so, he brought Mason with him. Because sometimes healing doesn't begin with words, it begins with a paw on your chest and a heartbeat beside yours in the dark. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with someone who believes in loyalty, courage, and second chances. Because sometimes, the hero in the story walks on four legs. Mason smiled. So did I. This isn't just a story about a war dog. It's not about medals, or rank, or battlefield glory. It's about something far more rare, something invisible, something sacred. It's about loyalty that waits in silence, about pain that doesn't ask for sympathy, about a love that doesn't need language to be understood. At the heart of this story is Rex, a K9 German Shepherd, trained for war, tough, intelligent, precise. But what makes Rex unforgettable is not what he did in combat. It's what he did when it was over. He waited, left behind in a hostile forest, injured and alone. Rex didn't panic. He didn't run. He didn't give up. He remembered a voice, a face, a promise, and so he waited. For Mason Briggs, a soldier he trusted with his life, his partner, his brother, and Mason. He did the unthinkable. He made a choice no soldier should ever have to make, to walk away. It wasn't cowardice. It was survival. Mason left Rex not because he wanted to, but because he believed it was the only way to save him. He left with a promise. "I'll come back." That moment broke both of them, but it didn't define them. Because the greatness of this story is not in the separation, it's in the return. Mason fought every order, every chain of command, every logical reason not to go back, and he did. He crawled through brush, he raced against fading daylight, and when he found Rex barely breathing under a fallen tree, he didn't cry. He carried him because that's what brothers do. That's what loyalty looks like when it costs something. Rex's body healed slowly, but his spirit, that took longer. We see the impact of trauma in humans every day, through behavior, through silence, through withdrawal. But we don't talk enough about how animals carry trauma too, how they remember abandonment, how they internalize fear, how a dog once trained to run into danger could suddenly freeze at a familiar voice. Rex didn't wag his tail for days. He didn't respond to touch. He didn't eat unless Mason hand-fed him. He was there, but he wasn't there. But healing came in quiet ways. In the sound of Mason's voice, reading out loud beside the bed. In a frayed rope toy placed gently next to Rex's paw. In the long nights spent simply being beside one another, no commands, no expectations, just presence. And then came a flick of the tail, a glance, a slow, steady bark, until finally, the day came when Rex stood on his own, not just on four legs, but with purpose. It would have been enough if the story ended there, but life had more for them. Just when it seemed they had earned their peace, a letter arrived. The military wanted Rex back. Deployment, new handler, reassignment. It was legal. It was protocol. It was the system, but it wasn't right, and Mason knew that because Rex wasn't a number in a file, he wasn't a tool to be reassigned. He was a soul, a survivor, and Mason had made a promise not to the military, but to the dog who had waited for him when no one else would, so he fought again. This time not with weapons, but with words, with resolve, with paperwork and petitions, and fierce, unwavering love. And when the decision came through Rex's file closed, adoption approved, it wasn't a victory for Mason, it was justice. And then, almost as if the universe wanted to give them one final test, came the little girl. A toy, a street, a speeding truck, a split second, and Rex moved, injured leg and all. He launched his body between a child and tragedy, not because he was commanded, but because he chose to protect. Again, because that's who he was. This moment wasn't just about heroism. It was a mirror showing us who we are and who we can be. Rex didn't act because he was trained. He acted because, deep in his heart, he had healed. He remembered who he was and why he mattered. That's the hidden truth behind this story. It's not about a dog. It's not about a soldier. It's about two beings broken in different ways who found wholeness, not through therapy, not through orders, but through each other. It's about trauma that doesn't have to be permanent, about survival that turns into purpose, about the long road home and the ones who walk it with us. In a world so often filled with noise, there's something powerful about a story like this, told in actions, not words. Rex didn't need to speak. He showed us what devotion looks like. Mason didn't need a uniform to be a hero. He became one when he refused to abandon the one who had never abandoned him. Together, they rewrote what it means to serve. Together, they showed that true loyalty outlives war. And together, they reminded us all, sometimes, the most powerful bond in the world is between a man and his dog. If this story moved you, hold on to it, because in a time when we question so much loyalty, goodness, courage, this tale reminds us they still exist. In muddy forests, in quiet hospital rooms, on front porches bathed in golden light, and most of all, in the heart of a soldier, and the eyes of a dog who never gave up.